Greetings, adventurers, and welcome to the Micflayers podcast. And before we start today, I'm going to share with you an ancient piece of advice that holds true to this day. Heavy warrior, holy warrior in heavy armor. That's Paladin. And my name is Martin O'Dwyer, and I'll be your host for today's episode. And joining me, as always, is your host, Conor O'Brien. Not a fan of that one,
Conor? I declined to comment.
You dick. I'm joking. Yes. It's been an interesting week in D&D for us.
Yeah, I didn't kill you all this week.
You didn't kill us all. It was extremely cool, but also...
I did kill one of you.
You did permanently kill one of us, yeah, and I currently have a dagger permanently fused in my heart.
Yeah.
It's been a week.
It's been a week.
But,
I don't know if we mentioned it in the last episode, but I think we did actually very briefly. Yeah. Basically, you guys were in the situation where you fought like the equivalent of 4 Death Knights before facing down a god, a dark fae god, who took on the form of an ancient solar dragon. And that was like her transformation. And used to get all those hit points down, and then even fight her in other form. And the dragon, after fighting the 4 Death Knights, the dragon decimated you. But rather she is the goddess of dark fate and what's the word? Malice. Yeah. And so killing you is like, I don't know. Killing you is like eating like a delicious cake, like just in one bite, just straight down, gone, done. It's like you don't have time to savor it, you don't have time to enjoy it. Whereas she would much rather keep you alive but keep you miserable. And so she took your apprentice's eye, just cut it out of his head with your own spear, and then she killed the party's bloodhunter rogue, Aerith. Chopped his head clean off. I purposely made it very unceremonious. Just kill him, just very brutally done, dead outright.
You gave a hell of a monologue before it, though. That was a sick lore drop as well. So basically I don't know how familiar you guys were previously with Aerith's backstory, but he had told us that he had been like a torturer for the Elven rebels, and that was about it.
Yeah, so he was he was with the Elven rebels, and he was very anti-human, get them off our lands, reclaim our Elven lands for Elven people and stuff like that. And then he was like, you know what, I really hate humans. I'm gonna see if I can get in touch with a fae that might grant me some additional magic, kind of warlock style. And then I'm going to basically use that magic to kill even more humans. And he did get in touch with a fae. He thought he failed. In his backstory, the way he wrote it for me, he said, I failed. I actually contacted the wrong thing, which was a far realm, cosmic horror being. And that's what spurred him to become a blood hunter and want to chase down these aberrations and destroy their evil in the world. But actually, he did get through to a fae. It was her, and rather than her taking him on or whatever, she'd be like, you know what, it would be, because she's able to see basically everything that ever was or ever will be on a particular course of action, So she's like, or what I could do to make him miserable is show him this horrific being that he'll lose sleep over and that will torture him for years, and that will cause him to be alienated from his companions and the rebels. He'll lose sight of that, and he'll drift apart from all his people. He'll be alone. He'll be like separated because his mother is a very passionate rebel leader, and if he's not interested in that anymore, he'll drift from his mother and from his father, and have a poor relationship with them as a result. And it also drove him into like a substance issue, because he was one of what people call the Order of the Mutant.
Yes.
So he had a whole thing where he needed to take his alchemical stuff daily to balance himself a little bit, and that kind of forced him into that kind of substance abuse thing as well. So she's like, oh yeah, I could either kill him, or I could take him on, or I could just have him be miserable for the next few decades, and that's what she chose to do.
Just ruin his whole life instead.
Yeah, and then he didn't realize this. So Gavin didn't know that, so I dropped this on him in the moment, and then before he'd even say anything, just head gone with your own spear.
Yes.
And then she took a dagger from
Aerith,
and plunged it into your heart and snapped off the tip of it. So there's like 3 or 4 inches of dagger still in your chest. And let the rest of you live. But again, she maimed your your apprentice by taking his eye. She left that in you as a reminder, and it's not like killing you or anything like that, but it's like you are bound to her through a curse that is on that, and killed one of the party members.
It's been a while since we've had like a death.
I mean, we Arkham very nearly died. In the demonic brothel thing. But thankfully you had one wish left from the genie, and you used it to call Kerwin, the only cleric you know, to you, and she was able to cast Revivify straight away and then leave again. So there was quick thinking on that part, and then before that, then it was when I killed Mike because of a wobble the first time, because of a sleep spell basically gone wrong.
Well, no, a sleep spell that worked extremely well for the caster.
That worked exactly as it was meant to work, really.
Like, I don't think anyone's ever gotten more value out of a sleep spell than that one Darrow.
True, yeah.
he got away and killed 2 people.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because he had an NPC with you as well, and that NPC also got killed.
Yeah, Jesus, man, that was a rough fight for NPCs. And PCs.
NPCs, yeah, that was the first death, because we didn't have any deaths in the first campaign.
Not permanent ones, no. I died like 3 times.
Oh well, yeah. Sorry, you're right. Yeah, no permanent ones, and so this was the first time that a player character died, and you had just turned level 3 as well, and ironically, he was the Zealot Barbarian.
Which is why he was the only one still standing this time someone died. Because he's level 14 now, and he literally can't die unless you do some very specific things.
And I've made a list of those very specific things, because Mike was shit talking me in the chat all week. He's like, I don't believe. I was texting him during the week, and as I was texting him, he was like, yeah, well, I mean, I can't die now, and I'm like, I could probably kill you if I wanted to, and he's like, no, I don't believe you, and I'm like, oh, just tell the way to kill you, and he's like, really, what is it? And I'm like, I just told him 2 ways actually. And he's like, what are the ways? And I'm like, that's 4 now. And I just go, and the thing is, I genuinely was on Google researching different ways to kill him, and I'm looking at spells in the spell app that I have. I'm like, drops in 0, yeah, that'd work, yeah. And if and that would work as well, yeah. And I have like a bunch of spells and a couple different things that would straight up. The one I used on him this time was I just banished him from the fight.
Banishment would have been my very first one as well. Like, no, okay, you need to hit stuff. Good, yeah, you can hit yourself if you want. Go away.
Yeah. Banishment's a great old spell.
I got Vengeance Paladin, Oath Spells, Banishment. What a great spell to have is in your Oath Spells.
Especially if you do the secondary effect where you concentrate on it for the full, is it a minute? The full duration's a minute.
Yeah.
And then if they're in a plane that isn't a pocket dimension, an actual real plane that they're from, they're there. Yeah.
Because it does send them back to their plane of origin if they're not from the material plane.
Yeah, that's actually how broken the end of campaign 1 got for us, because you guys were so OP. The last boss was the spellcaster. He was like a very powerful wizard and stuff. I basically broke every rule in the book with him. I just didn't care. I was like, if I'm going to have any chance of just giving you a tough fight, I did everything. I had him. He had 5 legendary resistances. And then he also had 3 what I call legendary vulnerabilities, where if you succeed, he can just chooses that you fail. So he can force you to fail saves 3 times a day. And I also had it so he could cast 2 spells in a turn, and I think he could also concentrate on 2 spells at a time.
I distinctly remember him being able to concentrate on 2 spells.
And because the opening thing I did is you guys went there with 3 or 4 of your closest allies who were like, one was a powerful paladin / blade singer, one was like a cleric, I think, and there's a couple others I can't remember. You had like 3 really decent people with you that were relatively high level that really would have buffed out your party. And I was just like, yeah, so for his opening move, he casts banishment or whatever it was. Is a great. No, you can cast banishment at a higher level. That was it. You can do more than one person, and he did all 3 of those people. And then I was like, cool. Now for his second spell of this turn, he cast Time Stop. And I just waited the full minute, and then by the time that was over, it's like, cool. Now all your companions are permanently back in the material plane.
That was like. I distinctly remember that being like, you fucking oops.
It's right.
Yeah,
you fucking what? At 10 minutes, fine. You fucking what? Like, and then just like, yeah, it was like Amakir. We had a cleric that like whose name I can't remember, and then we had someone.
It was Karina.
Karina, that was
I think it was Karina anyway.
Yeah, no, it would make sense for it to be her as well, yeah, because it was Amakir, her, and it was probably like Kay as well, or something like that. And just boom, 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 all gone immediately. Like,
all gone.
Those I just sit there being like, so I have to thank the Clockwork Man now. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, okay. But that was just that kind of stuff is so sick though. When you like, particularly with like big important boss fights, it's always fun to like throw in a little thing where like, oh, they can break this one rule that they normally couldn't, just to twist that knife a little. Just be like, oh, you thought.
But again, this is a 20th level thing.
Mm-hmm.
I had five players in the game, and like you were all not only 20th level, but all of you had crazy powerful magic items. And the thing is, I let you wear it so much in campaign 1. Like at a certain level, you went to this college, Stormfall, I think it was, Stormfall College, and like there was an artificer there, like a master artificer, and you were like, oh, I only have so many attunement slots. Could I fuse magic items together? Because I have this armor, but also a cape. So could I make that part of the one thing? And I was like, yeah, sure, but it would probably cost you like 15,000 gold. And you were like, that's grand. I have 35,000 gold on me right now. And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. Oh god. What was I think this ended up just calling that the armor of the Night Angel. It was like fire. It was like red dragon scale plate mail. So it was fire resistant. It was also done with mithril, so it had no
disadvantage. It could fly.
Yeah, it could fly for an hour.
Cloak with the wings, or
it was Cloak of the Bat. Yeah, no, Cloak of the Bat. Cloak of Flying.
Cloak of Flying. Yeah, where you could fly for a minute or 10 minutes or something like that.
It was an hour, sorry.
Oh, was it an hour? Jesus. And then I think it also had a +1 potentially as well to AC.
I think it also had a +1. Yeah, it was.
And then you had that, and you had your legendary level great sword.
Yes, and which you let me use in one hand because you made that feat that if you had over a certain level of strength,
I mean,
it was a great sword in one hand.
Yeah. It was like a strength requirement of like 16 or 17, which didn't matter to you. And if you pick this feat with that prerequisite, you can use heavy weapons in just a single hand. I was just picturing Orin from Final Fantasy X, the guy who like rests it on his shoulder, and he just drops this enormous sword on you. Yeah. But yeah, I let you do that. And you also, I rolled on a table at one point. Where I was like, okay, for this encounter, I'll roll on tables. I don't normally do that. Let's have a bit of fun. The first thing I roll is a +3 shield.
Oh, the shield of the giant vanguard, yes.
Yeah, and I was just like, I need to counter this a little bit. So I made it that it's so big. It does give you that bonus to your AC, but it's so big it limits your speed, and you cannot, under any circumstances, fly, or be on a mount or anything like that. Any sort of flying mount. If you are wielding the shield, it is just too heavy. It's designed to be used as a buckler by Storm Giants. So for you, it's like a tower shield.
Yeah, that shield was so OP. It was hilarious.
The whole campaign got so I let so much off that, like, and then like when we started campaign 3, I told you guys outright, I'm like, there's gonna be a lot of no's in this campaign. You need to understand that going in. And you were like, yeah, okay, we had our fun. We got away with a lot.
Yeah, I distinctly do remember, like, our magic items are pretty nuts. But that's actually a really good spiral off into my first point for today, Conor. So as it's someone who has DM'd a full 1-20 campaign for a paladin, me, what would you say are the paladin's strengths when it comes to the 3 pillars of D&D? For anyone who doesn't know, that's roleplay, exploration, and combat.
It'd be quicker if I just named their weaknesses.
You can do that if you want.
They're not great at range stuff. That's about it.
No,
seriously, that's genuinely about it. Paladins are, I've said this before, Paladins I think are the most versatile class in the game. They are the best all-rounder. They can be dex or strength based when it comes to their weapons. They have proficiency in all armors, so they have really high AC typically, and they can use spells like Shield of Faith and stuff like that. They are they also have a ton of hit points because they're D10 hit dice. They have spells that give them a lot of like utility, and they don't have big. They have a couple of big damaging spells, but primarily they have a lot of healing and buffing and debuffing spells and stuff like that. So they're great for utility. And then they just hit like absolute trucks because their innate class ability is Smite, which gives you additional D8 of Radiant. Very few things are resistant to Radiant. So yeah, they're heavy hitters, they're heavy tankers. They've got access to spells. They're good at all weapons except for range. They can use ranged weapons. There's nothing stopping them. They just don't get smite and stuff on it, so it's not as effective. And then on top of all that, then they're charisma based as a class as well. So in social encounters, you're gonna be really capable in persuasion and intimidation and all that kind of stuff.
So that'll be the end of today's episode, folks. Thanks very much for.
That's Paladins in a nutshell, man. I mean,
you kind of just demolished the list of like points I'd set up really to have a chat in one go there. No, it's great. It's like all super right. So I suppose if Paladins are that good, do you think that they are overpowered, or do you think that the other classes need to be buffed to a level to compete with the Paladin?
I never thought Paladin was inherently broken or anything. At no point, well, until like I start giving you +3 shields. But I never thought that.
Haste as a note spell, really.
You had haste as well. Oh, Christ. 120 feet of fly speed and plate armor, like Christ.
As well as +2 AC and advantage on dex saves.
Yeah. Oh, ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I never felt that they were inherently broken. Again, you could magic item dependent, but yeah. No, I mean, they're very good at a lot of things. You know. You know what? I guess though they're not necessarily. Are they? I'd have to do up the numbers, but I think probably they're probably a solid 8 out of 10 on all but one aspect of being a character, and that one aspect is well, not one, but one of those aspects is just ranged based stuff. Because again, you can pull out a crossbow or a longbow as a paladin. There's nothing stopping you. You just can't use your smites and the smite spells or smite class feature.
Yeah.
So it's not that it's bad. It's going to be on par with any 5th level, fighter who's also making 2 attacks with a longbow. So there's nothing really. It's not like, again, it's not. Yeah, you know what I mean. So yeah, I think they're a solid 8 out of 10 on all those other things I mentioned, though. They're not a 10 out of 10. They're not as tanky as a bard, but they are tanky. They're not dealing as much consistent melee damage as a fighter, particularly at higher levels, because a fighter will, even though a fighter doesn't have smite, a fighter doesn't need to have smite if they're making 3 and 4 attacks a turn and then action surging twice in a short rest, Yeah, like a fighter will do more consistent damage over that course. But again, Paladins are just a little bit behind. They're still doing a good bit of damage in a given moment, just not consistently over a long period. They have spells, but they're not as good at healing as clerics. They're good, especially with lay on hands.
Yeah, lay on hands.
Just not as good as clerics.
Pretty crazy.
And then what else do they have? Their utility spells. They're good with utility, but like a bard or really any other spellcaster would probably outpace them with utility. Maybe not a sorcerer. Maybe. No, sorry. No, do you know what? Not a warlock. Warlocks wouldn't outpace them on utility.
No.
But wizards, sorcerers, bards, druids, even clerics, they all would outpace them on utility spells. And then in terms of damaging spells, they're probably about an 8 as well. They don't get crazy stuff like fireball or disintegrate or anything like that, but they do get smites that they can augment their weapon attacks with, or destructive wave. I think it's a 5th level spell. It's one of the highest level ones they can get, and that does a ton of damage as well. But so I think they're like a solid 8 out of 10, and the math here makes no sense, but they're an 8 out of 10 on almost every stat, and that kind of makes them a 10 out of 10 overall.
I totally get what you mean, and that you're never really gonna like my personal experience of playing Paladin. I didn't go full 20 level, but at least 17.
You did 17, yeah.
17 because I had 3 warlock levels. But like, I never felt like I didn't have a response to something as a Paladin. Even if like I don't necessarily have like reactionary abilities, but like if something happened, I could always respond to it. Like someone utterly eats it on a dex save for some horrific spell and eats like 40-50 points of damage. Provided I'm not required to heal anyone else, I can go over, like, depending on level, I could go over and use an action and just dump like 30 hit points back into that person with no rolls. I just need to touch them.
Yep.
And like the one,
not only that, but you have your aura as well.
Yes, the aura of protection,
which gives you your charisma bonus on their saving throws.
And if you put
which again, that's going to make the likelihood that they're going to succeed even better. And even if they don't succeed, it's fine. I'll heal you up afterwards. I got lay on hands and I got cure wounds and a bunch of other stuff like.
And we'll get into it later, but there are also even specific paladin subclasses that specialize in that kind of damage reduction or absorption stuff. As well. But yeah, I like. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love playing Barb. It's really fun to just like tank all of the damage and then just like rip someone apart in a turn. It's super fun, like it really is. It's definitely up there with Paladin though. Like Paladin is, like I said, there are sometimes as a Barb I just don't have an answer for stuff. Like I remember like when we were fighting Giverel, the steel dragon that we fought. There was like if it got more than 30 feet away from me, I couldn't really do much. Which is why I immediately went out and got like gauntlets that let me throw lightning bolts. Like I just needed it, because range was not my strong suit. One thing I would say is another weakness of the Paladin. It's not super obvious, but when you were saying, if you're looking at like damaging spells or utility spells versus like other casters, Paladins, most of their spells, and like you said, they get destructive wave. You get destructive wave. But when you hit your like final tier of spellcasting as a paladin, that was
17th level.
I got that at level. I got that at level 20 in our campaign because that was when I hit my 17th level of paladin, and I used it once. But like, so that's basically like you have to get to level 17 to get any really big area of effect spells. So, but for everything else, the vast majority of a paladin spell list is specifically usually dealt for one-on-one fights. Like your smite spells, they're all only affect one creature.
Like you don't get any well, again, bar destructive wave, you don't get many
and that's
area
level 17
stuff.
Like
you get that at level. At least I believe so.
It is 17. No, it is. I remember because it was the last thing I got in my with Eru in terms of my oath spells. It's like destructive wave.
17. You get your 1/5 level slot at 17.
Yeah, you can have one slot. Yeah, you can do it. Like, but it's really really good. That is one other weakness I would say, just specifically in the combat thing, is that if there's like a swarm of enemies, the paladin can only cut down 2 at a time. Still, realistically, it's going to be 2 at a time. Unless you've gone some kind of like dual wielder paladin with 2 weapons, and then you can maybe do 3 with your bonus action. But like you're not gonna beat the wizard or the sorcerer that just goes fireball in that general direction. It's like a really copy pasta D&D meme. It's like a sword may have your name, no, a bullet may have your name on it, but fireball is addressed to whom it may concern. And you're just never going to outpace that kind of area of effect. You can control quite a lot of the battlefield as a paladin, just with your various abilities and like particularly stuff like
your aura particularly, and then there's different aura effects, isn't there, depending on your
each class I think gets different gets a different
you get a speed boost if your glory. Redemption gets if you take damage you can use reaction magically. The ancients can magically reduce damage.
Vengeance I believe is the immunity to fear.
Vengeance I think is the immunity to fear,
which
Relentless Avenger. Oh no, sorry, actually Relentless Avenger, this is the standout one actually, because they get this. The Vengeance is a standout one because most of the others at 7th level get some sort of aura, and then at 15th level I think it is that aura or expands from like 10 feet to 30 feet.
Yes.
But the Vengeance is like one of the few ones that's different, where your 7th level ability is Relentless Avenger. So when you hit a creature with an opportunity attack, you can move up to half your speed. After the attack as part of the same reaction. This doesn't provoke opportunity attacks.
Yeah, and then 14th level.
It's a way for you to like go, oh no you don't, when someone's trying to run away.
And then I think 14th level that upgrades to a thing called like Solo Vengeance, and you get if whatever creature you've marked as your vow of enmity, if it attacks, you can make a reactionary attack against it.
Yeah.
Which it's just about giving you more opportunities to smite things. Like Vengeance is a hell of a fun thing. Right, so I suppose the other kind of big thing that people always bring up when it comes to paladins, and particularly 5e paladins, is that paladins are now basically decoupled from worshipping a god. They're like the terrible joke I made in the intro. Holy warrior devoted to a god. You're basically a crusader.
That's really where the base idea for it comes from. Is a Christian crusader in the Middle East. Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. What do you like? Do you think it's a good, bad, or are you different towards the fact that now with a paladin it's much more centered on like your convictions of your ideals? You get your oath, and your oath will have tenets which are kind of your guides on what you should and shouldn't do as a paladin, rather than having to like specifically follow like the creed of this specific god, like be it like Lathander or like Corellin, the guy who created the elves.
Lathander,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm usually always in favor of anything that gives a player more freedom to explore different avenues with the same tools, if that makes sense. So taking, like, when you played Eru, who was your Vengeance Paladin, he had a god named Kurok, and we came up with that god specifically for your character. You're like, I want to have a Vengeance god, and I was like, cool, I don't have a Vengeance god yet, so let's come up with one. And it ended up being super cool, and he was a cool god, and you interact with him loads, and it does some good plot points there. But I think that was my first campaign running, so I very much had it in my head. And I think also I played in a game at that point where there was a paladin, and he very much had a god, and he would talk about this god that he worships, and he's it was Ross, and
it was Velas.
Velas was Velas worshipping the Platinum Dragon?
Yeah, he was the worshipper of Bahamut.
Yeah. So again, my only real experience at that point when that had happened, and then when you decided to play Paladins, that you both wanted to play Paladins who had religious ties, and I'm like, that's fine. I had no problem with that. And in fact, at the time, I felt like that was kind of part and parcel to being a paladin. Paladins and clerics are the religious clesses, and everyone else is like either not, or you can be if you want. But then if you're going to go down that route, then why does a cleric I can make less of an argument for, but a paladin, you can, it's more about your conviction to a cause. Paladins kind of with clerics, it's like you have a very personal relationship. You're essentially a priest.
Yeah.
So it's a very personal relationship you have with this higher entity, whereas with paladins, it always felt like clerics. I'm going to try to phrase this in the most elegant way I can.
Okay.
Clerics live by the church. Paladins work for the church. They're like, I do this job because I want to, and I'm devoted to what the church is doing, and the god that they worship, and I probably worship them as well. But it's like, Paladins almost came across more like this is they're kind of down in the dirt getting stuff done guys, whereas clerics are kind of more like almost like executives, but then they have far more invested in the church as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. That's the way they've always been in my head. So it makes sense that a paladin would be able to just call this a job. I'm just clocking in at 9, clocking out at 5, and then clerics, of course, like I said, there's a lot more buy-in as a cleric. Now I'd be up for anyone who came to me and said, I want to be a cleric of this, but I also like don't want to have a god associated with me. I'd be like, okay, how can we spin that, because I'm open to the idea. I also like the idea that, particularly with my new worlds, let's say my new world, I've been playing for like 3 years, particularly with Asteria, the idea of what the gods were came into question an awful lot for me, in terms of like, because we had a very set pantheon of gods in the previous campaign.
Yeah.
And I moved away from all of that, and now I'm kind of like thinking like, okay, there are multiple gods, but what if gods disagree? Or rather, what if you have like this human kingdom and this human kingdom, and they're both like, so for example, in my previous world, there's a strict pantheon. There was a god of war. I think it's Bregor was the god of war. Yeah. So what if you have like this kingdom here, and they're a human kingdom or just a general kingdom worshipping this singular pantheon of gods, and then you have this other kingdom, and then they go to war, and all of a sudden you have a paladin of this kingdom and a paladin of that kingdom, or clerics even, and now they want to fight because their kings demanded of them, but they worship the same god. How does that work if it's too closely related with the gods? Like, is the god like, oh no, 2 of my kids are fighting, I should probably break that up? Like, what does that mean for them? I think true. Oh, I mean, like, realistically, a war god might.
War god's gonna go like, fight.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, oh, you're both fighting. Great. Let me know who wins, and that'll be my favorite. because that kind of makes sense.
That's very much how Ares is characterized in the Percy Jackson films, like in the films, books, not the films, the books, because he's very much kind of constantly trying to steer things towards a giant war, because he's the god of war and he likes
Who
war.
Who does Sean Bean play in those?
Zeus.
Oh, he's Zeus, okay.
Yeah. Which, we can see why you picked him, but like, also no.
Yeah. So I went off a bit of tangent there, but yeah, I like the idea that paladins can just be, it's more about their conviction to a cause rather than anything else. Particularly because that actually makes way more sense when you take into account the Oathbreaker. Mm-hmm. The Oathbreaker is a paladin who has broken their oaths, no longer behaving by these rules. But like, if that could be a paladin that's turned away from their god, they no longer worship the god that they kind of originally did, then how do they still have power? And the answer is they're just fanatical in a different way.
Yeah.
And it's that sheer force of will, that force of character, that it manifests as magical energy. And they are so downright assured of what they want to pursue, whether it's like something, it could be something like a genocide of an entire people. They might be like, I'm going to destroy this entire nation. Mm-hmm. And then they're an Oathbreaker, and it's their dedication to wanting that so bad that manifests their power. Again, with clerics, it's a bit trickier because their power is kind of described as coming directly. Yeah. It's a direct handoff from their god.
Yeah, I've always thought there was a really nice delineation putting it in how their spell lists work, because clerics can cast commune, but paladins cannot.
Yeah. So, I didn't realize that.
Clerics can commune directly with their god. A paladin just has to pray like any other schmuck, and a paladin is gonna, like, if a paladin wants to directly commune with their god, they have to do so through a cleric of their god. So, like, I've always looked at it like kind of like that, and I will confess, when I was making Era that time, I absolutely, even though I read the tenets and the oaths and stuff, because obviously I read to them all, and then saw like, oh, glory, devotion, like ancients, vengeance, cool, and then read the tenets.
Well, there was only the 3 at the time. Like.
Oh, was it? Oh yeah, no, was it not devotion, ancients, vengeance? Was that it?
Yeah, those 3. Actually, technically, Oathbreaker was in the DMG as well when we started that campaign.
That was it. Yeah.
Now that I mention it, actually, what were the second paladins we got in Xanathar's?
That's a good question. Was it not Conquest, Redemption, and Glory? No,
Conquest. I think it's just Conquest and Redemption.
Yeah, because Glory was in
Tasha's.
No, Glory. Actually, no, Glory was in the ancient Greek one. Theros. Yeah,
Mythic Odyssey.
Yeah, that was in there. But yeah,
it was. I think maybe those 2, and also that treachery one that showed up in the UA, where they were all still in playtesting when you made Eru. So really, you only had like 3.5 if you count the Oathbreaker to choose from.
Oh yeah, but like I think I literally like read Vengeance and skipped all the way and like read through things like cool, and then I got to like the 20th level ability where it's like you turn into an avenging angel, and I was like ding 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 ding, we have a winner. But I will fully confess, when I was making Eru at the time, even though I read the oaths and stuff, I absolutely went, oh yeah, paladin, god, serves a god, definitely serves a god, which is why I was a vengeance paladin of a vengeance god.
Yeah,
and like now if I had to go back and remake Eru from start, like concept wise, I would probably pick like, I don't know, like some other kind of god, or like related or something, like maybe not strictly like vengeance, maybe like a justice god and I'm a vengeance paladin, something like that, where like you
could spin that,
where like, because the thing I started pivoting towards with him towards the end was because they describe vengeance paladins as like judges.
Mm-hmm.
So like, yeah, like Judge Dredd is a vengeance paladin, like straight up, he just is.
Yeah, more or less. I did always like even looking, Batman is vengeance in his own words.
Also the knight
proclaimed vengeance.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, even though I agree with you though, like I said, like I do think if you want to, having a god as a paladin or a cleric is a fantastic role-playing point.
Yeah.
Even if you're not religious in real life, it can be fun to kind of like delve into that in your character. And
if the gods, if we were I've always said, if we were living in like a Forgotten Realms style world where like we had concrete goddamn proof that the gods existed and they interacted with people on a daily level, I would be a paladin or a cleric like that. Give me all the cool magic powers.
But there's I was gonna say something there. I'm blanking.
Sorry, I entirely distracted you there.
What was I saying? Them gods. Yeah, I really liked what we came up with for Kurok, who was your vengeance god. Because he had a cool story where he was actually only a demigod. He wasn't a full-fledged god because his father was. His father was Bregoth, wasn't he? Yeah, his father was the god of war, Bregoth, and then his mother was a human warrior queen, who Bregoth fell in love with. He was like, this woman is fantastic at like she wins every battle she goes into. She's a leader and she's fearless. And he fell in love with a mortal woman, and then had Kurok, and he grew up to be, you know, a lesser god, but he didn't really have a domain or anything until his uncle came in, who was a god of justice, and was like, hey, you know, our laws are like you can't like bed mortals and have children and offspring with them. And he's like, and you also can't harm other gods. So I can't do anything about this half-breed son you have here, who's a demigod, but I can absolutely murder this woman over here for you taking her as a wife. And then as a result, Kurok became the god of vengeance, and swore that one day, even though the laws prevented it, one day he would find a way to enact vengeance against his uncle for killing his mother. Even though his uncle was just following the law, and he's being really robotic about it, not giving a shit. And he was just like, yeah. And then we had this whole thing where like he was always depicted as being a hooded, winged, armored angel of vengeance, but also he was always depicted as having tears running down his cheeks because he was sorrowful for the loss of his mother.
It was, yeah, we got to do some really, really cool stuff, and like I really enjoyed all the roleplay we did have going back and forth as like Paladin and God. That was like super, super fun, and like always. Yeah, anytime you were
in hindsight, that was probably like the biggest woman in the refrigerator thing of all time. Yeah,
you absolutely fridged Kurok's ma'am. Yeah.
Yeah, but, in my defense, this was 7 years ago when we started this campaign.
Yeah, we were
7 or 8.
Not good writers necessarily, either of us, because I basically went I distinctly remember the things that inspired Eru were like Naruto, and I can't tell you exactly why because it'll be a spoiler. A series of books I was reading called the Night Angel trilogy, and I literally just went Night Angel, Knight Angel. That's who I'm going. But it was a really cool thing where he was the Night Angels were these sort of ephemeral deities that the main character kind of served as an assassin, and they had this whole thing where like if you had a specific magic item called the Black Kakari, it would show you could see people's sins in their eyes when you looked through it, because you could. It was That's like cool. It was sort of like the Venom symbiote and would like coat the main character's body in like liquid metal, and he could bring it to his eyes and see people's sins in their eyes, and then like if it was particularly egregious, he would just be overwhelmed with this desire to like punish them, and he'd start like. Literally like looks into one villain's eyes and like sees all this horrible stuff, and he's like, before I even moved the Kakari formed a punch dagger over my fist. Like it's a very edgy boy series, but it's a very fun series, and it totally.
Well, look, Eru was a very edgy.
Eru was a very edgy boy, but it was fun to be. It was fun. There was a lot of edgy boys in that party, but it was fun to be that particular edgy boy. But yeah,
there was a lot of edgy boys. I was thinking about it now. There was literally like you as the vengeance paladin looking to kill the one to kill my parents, and then there was Drunan, who was like, my father betrayed me and cast me out of my kingdom, and I'm a lost prince kind of thing. And then there was Mike, who was like, I'm the last of my kind. I'm the only blue dragonborn left. Yeah. And then Tara was like, I was exiled from my village to go on a quest.
I totally forgot about Tara's on.
Tara's like, I was a monk who was exiled from my village, so that I can complete a quest to return an ancient item, but I cannot return now that I've left. And it was just like, it was all so edgy. And I was the only one, but only because Erin didn't write a huge backstory. She was just like, I'm just happy to play. So like, she's the only one who didn't have an edgy backstory.
That's legitimately why I specifically made Log have like alive and well parents this time around.
Yeah.
Like, no, for once a D&D character will have parents that are fine. I suppose, do you want to jump into talking about some of our favourite or maybe less favourite subclasses for the Paladins based on all the old here?
I like how you said less favourite, because I know exactly where you're going to go when you go less favourite.
Okay, I know you're going to say this. I'm not the biggest fan of the Open Sea, but what I will say, and I feel like it's growth from the last time we talked about this, because we did mention this in another episode, I can see a character concept for these now, and I can see, I personally would probably not pick it. like it's not my taste necessarily. Unless you were doing like an aquatic campaign, then maybe I'd go for it. And like you could even use it for some really cool stuff. Like if you wanted to do like I'm only saying this now because House of the Dragon is currently on and it bangs. But like if you wanted to do like an Ironborn character, if you were playing like a Game of Thrones style D&D game, or like even a D&D game set in Westeros, I'm positive there's something on DM's Guild. Like you could totally do an Oath of the Open Sea thing, and just like completely shape that around like paying the Iron Code and paying the Iron Price and all that kind of good stuff.
While we're actually on the topic, can we talk about something more general before we jump into the subclass specific? And I only bring it up because you're pitching an Ironborn character, and there's something that all Paladins have that no other class has, and this is basically a set of rules to play your Paladin, and it's your tenants.
We kind of like offhandedly mentioned it. Yeah, each subclass comes with a specific list of tenants. I as a player anyway, I found super useful, and I actually would find myself regularly going back and rereading the tenants of like the Vengeance Paladin. Because, like, just to use it as an example, the tenets of Vengeance are fight the greater evil. Faced with a choice of fighting my sworn foes or combating a lesser evil, I choose the greater evil. No mercy for the wicked. Ordinary foes might win my mercy, but my sworn enemies do not. By any means necessary, my qualms can't get in the way of exterminating my foes. And restitution then. If my foes regrew on the world is because I failed to stop them, I must help those harmed by their misdeeds. And I legitimately did my best to kind of keep to those. I distinctly remember like stuff like when the Clockwork Man's ship blew up a big chunk of Acilia, and you were kind of like, you kind of give us, that was kind of a narrated moment, but you were like asked us, you know, what do you guys do for the next 2 days, and I was like, Eru immediately goes out and starts like trying to pull people out of buildings, healing people, just basically burns himself out entirely and all of his magic, trying to like find and heal people, because that was the final tenet of the Vengeance Paladins. Like if you failed, like, it's basically the Spider-Man speech. Like if you fail to stop the evil doing harm, then you are responsible for the harm done by that evil, and you must make restitution for that. So like I really enjoyed that, and like it's very like, I think it's really useful, particularly as I was a new player and found it very useful. So if you're a new player and you're playing Paladin and you're not sure how, and maybe a situation arises where you're not sure how your character would act, you can flip back to the tenants there and just kind of read over them and kind of like run through your mind how your character framed by those tenants would react to this situation, and maybe you can find an answer to a situation that was kind of puzzling you.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like they were really, although they can be a little bit rigid sometimes. I do feel like they're a really good rule set, or kind of almost like training wheels to teach people how to be good role players. Because nowhere else in any other class does it tell you need to act this way, you need to do this thing. All other classes, they kind of tell you what the class is generally like, but that's not like necessarily telling you that you have to behave a certain way. Whereas the tenets that you get with your Paladin subclass, they kind of dictate how you should behave, and I think that's a really cool way of people looking at a situation, and every time you get a new kind of question pops up, or how do I go about doing this, look at your tenants and go, blah, 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 blah. Do any of those apply right now? Okay, number 3 actually kind of applies. I should behave that way. It can be really good to get you in the mindset of this is the person I'm playing, not me the player and what I decide to do necessarily.
Because that is like a duality in playing a Paladin, and it's like there's like something you might want to do, and then there's what like your tenets say how you would act. So like you as a player versus you as the character, and there's that kind of a bit of a tension there. I would say the only thing that kind of really does come with like similar strings attached would be Warlock. Like if you're playing Warlock, your patron is probably going to want you to act a certain way and do certain things, and if you don't do those things, then you're going to start losing your magic or worse.
Yeah, true. I that being said about the tenants and stuff as well. I like to take a more liberal view of them, or even like a how do you put it? Kind of in the same way that we talked about in the last couple of weeks with the backgrounds in the UA, in the one D&D UA. By the way, folks, the survey is live, so go and do that now. I filled mine out last night.
Ditto.
I was not kind to the Ardling.
God, man, the Ardling grappling rules and humans felt the beat of my ire.
Yeah.
Beat of my ire. What? No, never mind. Let's
beat
move
of
on.
my ire.
Sting of my ire. No, let's just keep moving.
Sting of my ire. I don't know. But yeah, I would say take in the same way that backgrounds, so they're kind of encouraging going forward that custom backgrounds are the primary way, but if you want to make a default one, you can. I would encourage people to almost, decide, use the Paladins as a jumping off point, or there's different subclasses, but maybe decide your own tenants, because like we'll say, if we're looking at the Oath of the Open Sea, like for example here you have one should be free to choose their own path without oppression, those blah blah. Seeing skies, when I look here, adapt like water. I don't feel like this is a little more neutral than I feel an Ironborn would be. If you're going to be like an Ironborn raider, you'd probably have a whole thing like maybe you'd have a tenet in there about the strong survive, and if you can take it, then it's yours kind of thing. Where like, well, I mean, I'm going to attack this village, or maybe these are old. Maybe your character's moving away from that, depending on the alignment you're playing. But like, if you were going to play as like an Ironborn, you'd probably have something about the iron. You'd probably be like the Iron Price in bold, and then the name, the explanation would be like, only the strong survive. We do not sow, we reap from those weaker than us and stuff like that. And you can play a character like that. So I would encourage people to potentially write their own sets of 3 to 4 tenants to kind of dictate how they want to play, based on, again, the god you worship, or just the path you follow if you're not playing a religious paladin.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, man. Oh, why do I want to play an open sea paladin now? Just do the Ironborn thing. That would be really cool. No, because it's like you could play that, or you could be a goddamn avenging angel when I hit level 20.
Well, we've talked about this before. To get back onto the open sea, I like the open sea. I think it's a really cool thematically, and it has some good spells and stuff like that. Its abilities aren't as powerful as, let's say, like devotion or vengeance. They're not as outwardly powerful. There's definitely some stuff here that if like you chose this subclass and then your DM turned around and goes, right, so you start off in the desert, you see some pyramids, and then you're like, oh great, I had to choose the open sea. Like, you would definitely be disappointed, and rightfully so, I think. But I think if you're like, oh look, we're playing on the Sword Coast, or we're playing on this string of islands, like Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire takes place on the Deadfire archipelago. So if you're like island hopping and stuff, like depending on the campaign, it could work really, really well.
Yeah, I can think of like multiple themed campaigns that this could work in. Like, so if you were playing like a Game of Thrones campaign, like, and you wanted to play the Ironborn, you could do this. If you're doing like a Pirates campaign, or you wanted to play like if you do like a Pirates campaign, like you can play like Jack Sparrow, doing a Pirates campaign, you want it. This actually, reading the tenants again, they absolutely took some inspiration from One Piece for the tenants.
Oh yeah.
Because like the main character Luffy, he wants to be the king of pirates, so that like everyone can live wherever they want to, because the world is like separated and divided by this thing called the Red Line, that like divides air, land, and sea, and like he wants to create a world where everyone can be free to be wherever they want to be, and live wherever they want, and eat as much meat as they want, and like that's basically no greater life than a life lived free.
How's that coming from?
He's doing pretty well. He's doing pretty well at the moment. Yeah,
I know One Piece has an absurd amount of episodes, and I'm like, has he gotten close? Is he getting there? Is he making progress?
So in the last couple of chapters, they finished the penultimate arc. Basically, they're into the final saga rather.
This is actually in the manga, is it?
Yeah, in the manga. Yeah, I think as of recording, the last chapter was either 1058 or 1059.
Jeez. And then what about the show then? How far back is that?
The show is on like episode 1000 and something as well.
Oh, it's not far up, so okay.
No, they're like, the show is probably like 2/3 of the way through the arc that just finished in the manga. The saga.
Okay, that's actually really good, yeah. Because
like, that saga in the manga, like if reading chapter by chapter, took 2 years to come out.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, One Piece is a trip, man. It's great, but it's a trip. But yes, if you wanted to do a One Piece campaign, would highly recommend Oath of the Open Sea. For that
Mike is listening now. There you go.
Oh man, like the day I mentioned pirates in my campaign and expected him to rush home and save his homeland. That was a terrible
your
mistake.
homeland is burning, but also there's pirates over here, and he's like, pirates.
I literally had to
your home pirates.
I had to give him like 3 visions of his homeland being swept away by a wave to like get him to come home. Like, oh man, great times. But if you had to pick like a top 3, shall we say, from the subclasses in terms, not necessarily in terms of like most powerful or anything, but just like in terms of concepts, like 3 ones that you love the idea of and like you've lots of concepts for and could just go nuts on. Are there any? What 3 will say would you pick?
What 3? Okay. I feel like. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Just conceptually, not necessarily mechanically.
Yeah, conceptually, not like again, like regardless of like power level or anything, like just stuff like you read what it's about and what you're meant to be, and immediately like your brain starts firing with ideas.
Okay, in no particular order.
Yeah.
Crown gives me a lot of ideas because I feel like when I look at Crown, it's someone who serves the realm. So that's an example of like not necessarily a religious one. Your devotion might be to your king or your queen, your monarch. And therefore that's where you manifest your abilities through your sheer devotion to protecting the realm. Talking Game of Thrones talk again, to protecting the realm. You're essentially like a gold cloak, I guess, in Game of Thrones terms.
I have the head of the city watch in one of the major cities in my campaign is an Oath of the Crown Paladin.
Yeah, there you go. And that's good, but like I like that as well because that could be a good or a bad guy. Like you could be an Oath of the. I like when you can kind of flip flop on it a little bit. You can have an Oath of the Crown who's like, I'm going to protect the people of this kingdom no matter what, and they're very good and they're very wholesome. You could also have an Oath of the Crown who's like, I don't really care so much about the little people. I need to protect the integrity of the systems that are in place. Like maybe your devotion is way more to your king than your kingdom, and therefore, if some civilians need to die, so that the royal family line can be protected and that the institution of the crown can be upheld, I'm going to do that. So you can have someone who is like very good versus, not very good, very easily with that subclass, and I like that. From a thematic perspective.
You haven't watched the Critical Role Calamity one shot, have you?
I'm on the 3rd episode, but I'm like 20 something episodes behind Critical Role. This is the furthest back I've ever fallen.
I'm about 5
and the same thing with Calamity as well. I'm only 2.5 into the 4.
Okay.
And the thing is, because I usually listen to them when I'm doing work around the house, and we haven't had much like painting or I cut the grass last week and I listened to a whole bunch for cutting the grass. I also put some like flooring into my cat's catio thing. Which took me like 4 or 5 hours. So I listened to like most of the 2nd episode and some of the 3rd episode there. But again, I only listen to it now when I'm doing labor work around the house, and I haven't been doing a lot recently.
The reason I bring it up is because Luis, I think his last name is Corazzo. Although I may be entirely getting that wrong.
I know the guy you're talking about though. Yeah.
Yeah, he's I can't remember. He's like, he plays a godless paladin. They call him the Godless. In the show, and he's an Oath of the Crown Paladin, and man, like needless to say, like also like the storytelling and by all the other character work by all the other people involved was great as well. But like, what a great concept for an Oath of the Crown Paladin. You are like the only martial character essentially in this city of mages, and you are their protector. Like you are like their, like, or rather the only important martial character, and you are like their protector. And like you are their sign that like you are like this martial protector who harnesses the power of gods without being like subject. That's the whole thing with him, and he like even says it to a specific character during the thing. He's like, I harness the power of the gods without serving them. I will not bend my knee to a god. Like that's such a great concept for that as well, in terms of like it makes me think of Leonin straight away, because in their breakdown of their culture, they're not atheist. Like they believe that the gods are real. They know the gods are real, but they just do not believe they are worthy of worship, and instead they kind of focus on themselves.
There's a word they have to describe the stat block for them. I can't remember what it is.
Iconoclast.
Iconoclast. That's it.
Yeah. So like they're like, I immediately jump to like a Leonin Oath of the Crown would be pretty badass, in that like you're just like, it's very much like the character of Pantheon in League of Legends, where his weapons used to be powered by divinity, but instead are now powered by his mortal will, which is just a really kind of basically Oath of the Crown as well. Like your powers come from your convictions. I'm a real big fan of those. Other ones that I really like, I would say Conquest is really awesome. Like if you're going to go for like a real kind of dark fantasy campaign, I would say, and you want to play a Paladin, I would say go for like Conquest Paladin, and they have like out of all of them probably the most metal tenants. Like if you read
that was the Flames of Hope, rule with an iron fist, strength above all. Strength above all. Actually, if you were to supplant that into the Oath of the Open Sea, would be a good one for the Ironborn.
Yes, actually, yeah. But like they get like really really good spells, and their class features are really great as well. Like their old spells, they get like 3rd level Armor of Agathis and Command, Whole Person, Spiritual Weapon, Bestow Curse, Fear, Dominate Beast, Stone Skin, Cloud Kill, and Dominate Person. And I love that they get the 2 Dominate spells to tie in with them being about conquest and about taking things and conquering them and like imposing their will on something. Yeah. It's all very
their whole aura, not aura specifically, say, but I mean in terms of like the thematic aura they give off is very much like the dark commander of a legion. You know, like they are leading a horde of cell swords or something like that, and just like decimating all in their path. You know, they're very very cool conceptually.
And their like capstone ability is really really dope as well. What a name, Invincible Conqueror! Like what a name.
Resistance to all damage. You take 1 additional attack as part of your action, so 3 attacks on a turn, and then you also crit on a 19 or 20.
Yeah, it's
insane.
It's so good. It's so good. Like you're just.
You know what? It's in terms of abilities, it's not like the sexiest of the 20th level transformations.
No.
But it's solid mechanic. It's so solid mechanically.
Yeah, and like, just have like at the level you're at there, 20th level, having a 3rd attack around is going to give you so much more damage as well, because you probably have some nasty magic item for you by then. Like.
Yeah, realistically, yeah.
And like then critting on 19 and 20 always good for the expanded crit range. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Conquest. What I actually really liked when I was looking at it, I think it was Redemption I was looking at earlier, and they have a lot of stuff. Yeah, like if you wanted to play, like it's not necessarily the kind of Paladin that I would go for personally, because like I think like if I'm playing a Paladin, I want to play the like basically like your Knight in Shining Armor going head force leading people into battle, that kind of stuff. Or like the cool Veget stuff or the Conquest stuff. Redemption is much more about you're basically a pacifist that carries a big greatsword.
Yeah, pretty much. One of the tenets in that peace, innocence, patience, wisdom. Yeah, like a 180 turn from the Conquest.
Yeah.
To the this one to Redemption.
But they're like aura, and their stuff is all centered around taking damage instead of someone. And it's really, really cool. So like starting at 7th level, you can shield others from harm at the cost of your own health. When a creature within 10 feet of you takes damage, you can use your reaction to magically take that damage instead of the creature taking it. It doesn't transfer any other effects that might accompany it, and it can't be reduced in any other way. And then at 18th level, that increases to 30 feet. Like, yep.
You take tough and you pump a lot of points into con, and then you play a dwarf, so you get a +1 on every level. You can block a whole lot of
and then like that ties in then with your 15th level, where you get 1d6. You regain hit points equal to 1d6 and half your paladin level if you end your turn fewer than half your hit points. Like you instantly just start regenning up as soon as you get that, so you can take more damage for your allies.
1d6 plus half your level, so at 20th level you're getting back like a minimum of 11 hit points every turn. Is it start your turn?
End your turn. Whenever you end your turn, and like when you get that healing, by the time it comes down to the end of your next turn, you've probably taken another hit anyway, so it's probably going to start like it. And there's no cap to it; it just passively happens. And then their 20th level one, you've resistance to all damage dealt by other creatures, and whenever a creature hits you with an attack, it takes radiant damage equal to half the damage you take from the attack. Like.
So that basically means you take half damage and the other half is reflected back, basically.
Yeah, and the only thing then is that you can't attack, cast a spell, or deal damage to a creature by anything but that feature while you're using it, because that goes against the whole redemption thing. Like if you
I see it here. Yeah.
It's just a little caveat, but like in terms of like executing a concept and sticking to it, like you're a pacifist, like. I see this as like, you're like retired old warrior who's seen too much blood and just like doesn't want to fight anymore and has seen too many people die in like stupid arguments for stupid causes, and so instead it's just kind of like I'm gonna be the guy who just calms stuff down. Like, I just imagine this is like the veteran who's just kind of is sick of war and fighting, but will go to it as a last resort if really needs be.
No, absolutely. It's a tricky one. I don't think it gets a whole lot of playtime by people, which is unfortunate because, again, conceptually it's very unique, very cool. I mean, if you're really going on the pacifist route, like, I could see it being a thing where, like, you don't want to fight anybody.
Yeah.
But then, like, if a fight kicks off and someone attacks you, you will attack them back. If I was going to play this, I would probably take, like, a quarterstaff, and that'd be my weapon of choice. And if someone comes at me, I'll fight you, but I would specify to the DM, like, look, unless I say so otherwise, this is always non-lethal damage. I'm always going to subdue and not to kill. So I will bump someone on the head to knock him out, but I don't want to ever take anybody's life. And, like, you could play this pretty comfortably without much restriction by making that specification early on, you know?
Yeah, no, it's and particularly like I particularly like the idea of using like a quarterstaff rather than like, you know, a mace or like, because you know this used to be the thing, like
people act like maces are like foam hammers, and they're not. They're sharp.
Yeah.
Like, maces have blades on them.
And like maces and warhammers were like became really popular because, believe it or not, folks, even in D&D, you can't actually really hurt someone with a sword if they're covered from head to toe in plate armor, unless you like get in between the gaps, like stab them in the armpits or like in the groin or the neck or whatever. But like if they're head to toe in plate, and you try and slash them with a sword across the chest, it'll just bounce off. It'll just bounce off. So they invented warhammers and like maces and mauls and stuff like that, so that they could just smash the armor in. And like literally, like we were talking about Game of Thrones earlier, Robert Baratheon versus Rhaegar Targaryen. He
caved in his chest plate on the Trident, the Battle of the Trident.
Yes, and all of the rubies scattered down the ford in the river. Like, but like, now if you look at any art done for that, his warhammer is like hideously, hilariously too big. Like a warhammer was tiny compared to what you see in anime or a fantasy rather. But like, yeah, no. This shit of like this stuff like, oh yeah, I'm a cleric and I don't want to make people bleed, so I have a maul. That's called a maul.
Yeah.
You're gonna make someone bleed.
Again, this is not like a police baton that hurts but doesn't, like, you know, I mean, this is a thing designed to break bones and shatter breastplates and cave in your chest and stuff. Like, it's that was a thing in older editions, right, where like clerics almost always had maces, but they would never carry a sword because they don't draw blood or something like that. And I'm like, I'm like, if you want to, like, quarterstaff is a far more realistic idea there.
Yeah,
Plus, I kind of like the idea of an armor, because you typically tend to have a quarterstaff if you're like a druid or a monk, all the unarmored people. And I'm like, no, I can like see what happens if you're a quarterstaff and you're like an armored guy wielding a quarterstaff stick, you know?
There's an absolutely sick scene in Wheel of Time where one of the characters he duels two basically trainee knights. In the White Tower, he like has a sparring match with them, and he just uses a quarterstaff, and they have two long swords, and he wrecks them, and it's an amazing scene. Anyone who's read Wheel of Time knows exactly the scene I'm on about, and it's exactly that. It's just a guy with a quarterstaff using range, and like, because you've so much range with a quarterstaff, like, it's crazy. But we're totally going off on tangents here in regards to
I'm just now getting an idea, and I'm wondering, you haven't seen Rogue One, have you?
No, I haven't, but I know who you're going to talk
you know
about.
Donnie Yen's character.
Donnie Yen, the guy with the stick, and he's blind, but he's force sensitive, so he's basically Daredevil in Star Wars.
Yeah, basically. So his name is Chirrut Emwe.
Yes.
And yeah, I could see myself playing, particularly actually now, because if the dwarf is to come out in the new book as we expect it to, you'd have tremor sense, which would let you actually do it. You could totally play that Chirrut Emwe character as a dwarf redemption paladin, where you're aiming for peace, but like, because he's in the situation where like he'll give stormtroopers and all that every opportunity just to walk away, and as soon as one of them puts their finger on a trigger, he hears it and he's just into it, like, you know, and he's like. Now, to be fair, he straight up kills people, because like there's a part where like he has a fella like with his quarterstaff in your man's neck, and he's directing your man in between all the blaster shots coming at him. He's just pointing him in the way, so your man is taking every hit, and then towards the end of that fight, I forget his friend's name. His friend is also like Force. He's not Force sensitive, but he does worship the Force, and he is like religious in that way. And he shows up, but he has this huge canister on his back and a big heavy gun, and he just decimates like 20 guys that surround Chirrut, and it's just like cool scene. It's a cool scene. We should watch for Rogue One. I'd be curious your opinion because it's a very divisive movie. Everything is.
I've heard it's excellent. That's all I've heard about Rogue One is that it's excellent.
Rogue One, yeah, a lot of people say that the first half is a bit slow and stuff, and that like the latter 40 minutes of the movie is like the latter 40 minutes is basically like Saving Private Ryan but in Star Wars. It's just the latter 40 minutes is the first 40 minutes of Saving Private Ryan, where it's just they're landing on beaches and they're fighting these overwhelming odds. And there's people being destroyed and decimated, and things being blown up everywhere, and it's absolutely amazing. And of course, you've probably seen it ends with the Darth Vader hallway scene.
Yeah, I've seen that scene. Yeah,
yeah, which is like, oh man, that like I don't care what you think about the rest of the movie, you cannot fault that scene.
No.
It seems outstanding.
It reminds me of I've not read the comic book, but I've seen the panel. It's from a guy who used to write the Iron Fist comics called Care Andrews, who did a Vader comic for Marvel. And there's a bit I don't know where it is in the canon of time wise of Star Wars, but Vader is in his full Vader gear, if that to kind of give it some context. And a bunch of rebels like surround him. Like I think his like ship is shot down and it crashes. And he
yes, I know the scene, yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, we've got you surrounded, and he's like, all I'm surrounded by is fear and dead men. And I was like, oh, that's such a great line. Okay, so yeah, in terms of our favorites, like I'm always gonna just naturally like lean towards vengeance. I just love like the Avenging Angel is such a awesome like fantasy stereotype as well, and like I also got to play that out. Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Yeah, I mean like you can't. I mean I think of the original three. Again, if we're talking about like the sexiness, the I can't think of a different word for it, but like you know,
cinematic nature of the abilities.
No, I prefer sexiness. Like the Vengeance Paladin very much is that it's a bit angsty. Yeah. It's also like the other two. If you look at like Devotion and Ancients, both good, both really good. So Devotion is so underrated because I think it's seen as the plain white bread of Paladins.
Yeah.
But they're so powerful. But Vengeance has that little bit of spice. It's a little bit edgy, a little bit dark. You know, it's everything cool and angsty about playing a paladin. And yes, I'm calling you out for being angsty, man, but we both know you are. So,
oh no! Look at me in my all black with all my tattoos and everything.
Yeah. I just want to slay demons and listen to Blink, man.
Sorry, that's oh god. What's that thing in Facebook? I'm in this photo and I don't like it. Oh wow, that's far. Ooh, that's far too close to the bone. Conor, what do you think about the whole lawful stupid paladin meme that exists in the community, where it's the rogue, it's your classic, the rogue, it tries to steal something and then the paladin's like, you can't do that because I'm a paladin and I'm so good that I don't let anyone steal and this is bad.
I mean, firstly, I think I talked about it a while ago with the tenants being really, really good for like role play and stuff like that. And they can be really good like guidelines, not so much rules.
I knew.
If anyone. But no, I mean they can be, but I think that like you don't want to take them too rigidly either. To the point where you like. I mean, like, what do you do in a situation like that? Or, like, realistically, if you're a reasonable player, because an unreasonable player would be like, the rogue took some coins from that place he shouldn't have. Oh, well, I'm an unreasonable player. I'm going to smite the rogue. That's an unreasonable response to that. Like, but I feel like a lawful good person, doesn't immediately go straight to, I'm going to decimate these people. And, you know.
Like, I feel like if you're like, I suppose this kind of also ties into stuff we said before about alignment. Whereas, like, personally speaking, in terms of how I run my games, your alignment isn't necessarily are you on the side of good or evil. It's more so, are you on the side of order? Like, it's the scale between like order and chaos, and then whether you're like chaotic good, chaotic evil, that kind of stuff, and how those intersections of like lawful evil and neutral all intersect with like order and chaos. That's how I've always viewed alignment, and I think one of the massive benefits of 5e paladins is that they have been decoupled from alignment, aside from like if you want to use a holy avenger, you have to be like a lawful, like or at least a good aligned paladin, I think.
Yeah, I mean they have been decoupled, but I all like paladins are in 5e are probably still one of the few classes that, even though they're not like rigidly attached to alignment anymore, because previously you had to play a lawful good. If you're going to play a paladin, you have to be lawful good.
The first big exception was the Oathbreaker, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas now you don't have to be any alignment to play a paladin or anything like that, but there is still remnants of that in I think more so than other classes. I think you could play a ranger or a sorcerer or a bard or a fighter and never once from level 1 to 20 have to talk about your alignment. Whereas I feel like with a paladin, it's something that you need to think about, because I mean, when you think about it, paladins are people who are trying to lead a certain lifestyle, and with that in mind, you should probably have some sort, again, you don't be rigid on it, but you should have some sort of goal in mind about what kind of person is my paladin aiming to be. If you're conquest and you're like playing like essentially like a Darth Vader or something like that, you're going to be a dark knight who is going to enforce the law and do what's right for their kingdom, but at any costs, and if anyone gets in my way, I will cut them down. You're going to be like Darth Vader, and you're going to be lawful evil. You're going to be going to whatever means. Or you could like a crown, or you could play a crown and be like Captain America, where you're like lawful good and you believe in the system and you're trying to do what's right. Or you could be Captain America in the second or third film, where you're more like neutral good because you've lost sight of the system, but you still want to do the right thing and stuff like that. I think it's good to know where you're aiming for, but you don't need to like constantly reference it. It's no longer a hard rule with paladins that you need to be a certain alignment, but it is sorry, I'm stifling a sneeze. It is pineapple. That worked amazingly. But yeah, it's no longer a hard rule, but it's the kind of thing where it's a good thing to keep in your back pocket. Just like your tenants. You don't like if someone said to me, "Hey, can I play a paladin? But can I just ignore these tenants? I don't care about them." I'd be like, "Yeah, sure, go for it." It'd be different if they came to me and be like, "Hey, can I play a paladin? But I don't like this lay on hands. I'm never going to use it." I'd be like, "Well, why?" Whereas like if you want to play a paladin and just ignore your tenants, I'd be like, "Sure, but let's kind of like talk that through and see what's there."
Maybe make some new
likewise.
Tenants.
Sorry.
Maybe make new tenants for it.
Maybe make new tenants, yeah. Or and again, they don't have to be the most rigid thing in the world. I think if you're going to be a paladin, and you come to that situation, a reasonable person who comes to the situation where my rogue in the party just stole something, the paladin and the rogue, I think, should have a conversation about that. And again, I think the rogue is just as much in the wrong if they know the paladin is like a good character. And now it's like imagine being out with a few friends and one of your friends starts like breaking stuff or or stealing things, and you're like, "You're here with me. If you get in trouble doing this, I'm going to get in trouble as well." So it's also not cool on the rogue to be pulling you into that situation as well,
Yeah.
So I think there's more nuance than I'm a lawful good paladin, I'm going to smite you if you take one gold coin. Far more nuance, but I also think that's maybe more of a party discussion to have maybe both in character and out of character about, hey, like I'm a rogue thief. How far can I go stealing that it's not going to upset your character? And the paladin might be like, well, look, I'm lawful good. I'm going to uphold the law. But if we come across thieves or evil people that are like doing bad things, dark wizards and thugs, part of gangs in the city and stuff like that, and you want to steal from them or take from them, knock yourself out. Or if they're people that I feel are bad people, and maybe that could be a fun little kind of like role play moment where like in any situation the rogue might turn to the paladin and like scratch his nose, and if the paladin scratches his ear in response, that means yes, you can steal from this person because I don't like them.
Yeah,
I feel like they're a bad person,
Yeah, I like that. I think like me and Drunan did something quite similar in our first campaign with it, because like luckily my tenants were kind of like deal with the bigger evil, so Drunan stealing from people really didn't register on my radar as a paladin, as long as he wasn't like being a massive dick about it. Like if he was stealing from orphans, I'm pretty sure Eru would have a problem. But like if he's just like pickpocketing people, he'd just be kind of like roll his eyes and kind of walk past and be like, oh, God's sake, like that kind of thing.
Eru, I think in a situation like that seems like small beans for Aerith, whose job is to enact vengeance on big evil, entities and other realm threats and stuff like that. Whereas for if he saw Brunin pickpocketing someone, as long as it wasn't like a very poor family or something horrible like that. If he saw just an average Joe Schmo walking down the street and Brunin took a couple of coins out of his pocket, I imagine Eru would kind of just do a whole like I'm not dealing with that and just gonna walk away kind of thing.
I don't have the time for this Mickey Mouse shit. Like, let's go.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff. And like, I really like that you can have that flexibility with Paladins now, and that you can like there are so many like there's a whole rainbow of smites that you can indulge in. Like...
Yeah, I feel like just you know what in the age of D&D we're playing at the moment, I feel like there's so much that you can if you want to, but also don't have to listen to in almost every facet of the game. You can play it this way if you want, but you don't have to. You can pay attention to this rule and take it as gospel, or you can kind of bend it every now and again because you don't really feel like doing it that way. And that comes mechanically with the game as both a player and a DM, and it also comes with like roleplay wise. If you want to, again, I feel like it would be detrimental to the party. Again, someone who's playing, like you said, lawful dumb. Where was that the phrase? Lawful dumb?
Lawful stupid.
Where they are they're a paladin, they see something happen and they're like, oh, I have to intervene, and and like let's say you're in the middle of like a very important mission and the rogue steals something and the paladin stops the whole train. They're like, wait, everybody stop what you're doing. I just saw you steal. You have to put that back. Like that could be detrimental not just to the mission you're on, but also to the table and like the people at the table. And like there's a time and a place. Think about it. Think about how a reasonable person would act, and then try to find the nuance in it and see if it can be worked out. Don't let, because again that's the meme, isn't it? That the lawful good paladin ruins everyone else's fun because they won't allow any of the wacky shenanigans to happen because you must be a very good, well-behaved, upstanding citizen or else. And I feel like just being a good player entirely counteracts being one of those lawful stupid paladins,
I think like totally agree with what you're saying there, and I think as well to add to it, I think it's definitely very much like a hangover from previous editions as well, where in previous editions if you wanted to play a paladin, it was extremely closely tied to serving a god, and most of the time the only alignment you could choose was lawful good. And back in those days when alignment really, really mattered, and you would had a lot more strict rules, and like particularly some DMs would have very strict rules in regards to the things you can and can't do as a lawful good character. And I feel like it's just like a thing that's kind of been grandfathered in, and like I think like 5e is really addressed with the whole like tenants and stuff, and like not having to be like, and like kind of allowing an interpretation of lawful, because like Eru was lawful good, but Eru drowned people in sinks like bad. Like he just like messed people up. He would do like really extreme things to people who were like who actually got on the radar of like, oh no, you're officially evil enough for me to care now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like there's like the best video I've ever seen. We're going to string into alignment very specifically, but best video I've ever seen.
Kind of inextricably connected to Paladin. If you're talking about Paladin.
Agreed, yeah. But the best video I ever saw with regards to any of that was Matt Koval does 2 alignment videos. One where he just gives examples of characters, because he has, you always see those 3x3 alignment
like
grids.
Straight up where I got that. I think you showed me that video, that Matt Koval video that you're talking about there, and that's where I kind of came over into the idea of like, no, I'm actually playing a lot, like because I would have classed myself as lawful neutral for the majority of our campaign until I watched that video, because I was like, well, I'm not lawful good because like I'm going in there and I'm like intimidating people and I'm like murdering people and I'm like doing all of this kind of stuff like that. I don't think necessarily like lines up exactly with lawful good, so I'm lawful neutral. But then like when I watched that COVID video, and I believe he kind of laid out a framework of what alignment actually is, and I completely changed my view on how that works.
the way you phrase it is that like, and I thought the opposite of this until I watched this video, and I think it makes far more sense this way. I always thought that characters that I play, or a character I was playing previously, like my character Vaskeen, I would have called him chaotic good. I should probably a poor example, but well, okay, I would have called him chaotic good. Now he probably still is chaotic good, but for the wrong reasons. I was calling him that because he does a lot of like crazy shit. Like he'll throw himself off a building, or he'll shoot someone in it with a split second's notice or something like that. That's the chaotic part. But it's always bad people. He's always, he's fighting bad guys. The best example he gives is that if you look at these 3x3 grids of alignment you always see online, and people do them for specific universes, if you pick one from DC, you'll almost always have Batman under like it'll be Commissioner Gordon is lawful good and Batman is chaotic good.
Yeah.
But the way Colville frames it, and to me it makes the most sense, is what does Batman want? What vision does Batman see of the world? Does he see a chaotic world where there are no laws but people treat each other well, so they're good, but there's like more disorder. People just do their own thing. They're very, is it egalitarian or libertarian or?
Like libertarian is like very little government oversight. Egalitarian is everyone's value is equal.
It's libertarian I'm thinking of. So where you have the least amount of interference from the government.
That's libertarian.
Yeah, and that's kind of what chaotic is in this instance. You want the least amount of oversight. You think if you're chaotic good, you believe that people will just do the right thing if they're left to their own devices. Everyone leaves everyone alone. No one interferes with anyone or tries to get anyone to follow any rules. People will just live lives like that. But Batman isn't that. Batman believes there should be laws. Batman believes you shouldn't be forming gangs and robbing people in alleyways and shooting parents and dropping pearls. And he has an idea of what the world should be, and it's lawful. He believes in law. Now, people will say, well, Batman doesn't follow the law because he's a vigilante and he hops on rooftops and he beats up thugs and he has no authority to do that because he's just a rich lunatic billionaire. But even though his actions day to day might come across as chaotic because he's not necessarily acting within the bounds of the law, the ideal that he is striving for, his end goal in an ideal world, is that law is achieved. That good law is achieved, that people aren't mistreating each other, and that the law is followed, and that people are, safe and living good lives.
He also very much lives by a code.
He does have a code as well, and he breaks that way more often than people think.
Early Batman, man, he was dropping bodies left, right, and center.
If you watch the Dark Knight trilogy, you'd be like, wow, Batman's so honorable because he never takes a life. But if you read the comics, he kills people on a regular. That whole like I'm Batman, I can't cross that line, but then but he does in this one comic. He does that in like 12 different comics.
There's
a lot of times now he has to be pushed very far to do it, but Batman has absolutely taken multiple lives.
He just lets this Russian supervillain, the KGB, starve to death in an underground tunnel that he breaks up.
Yeah, Batman is like, and if you're going into Frank Miller territory, all bets are off. Like all bets are off. But yeah, so that's the way Colville frames it, is that it's not necessarily about what a person's day-to-day actions are, but rather how do they see the world in an ideal way. And again, someone who is like chaotic good would see it as a libertarian, a good aligned libertarian society where everyone just looks out for themselves and doesn't interfere with anybody else, because that's the opposition to them. Whereas the other side of that is law and order, which means there is structure and rules and society and laws and people enforcing those laws.
And like laws don't mean good either. Like there's that delineation. People think like lawful just means you obey a law. It doesn't mean that law is necessarily a good law or a bad law.
Well, that's where you get your lawful neutral and your lawful evil. Specifically, like Darth Vader is lawful evil. He's lawful evil because he wants order. He wants the world and the galaxy to be shaped a certain way, but he doesn't really care if they need to steamroll over certain things to get it that way. He'll happily smash some other kid's castle on the beach because he needs more sand for the way he thinks that. Sorry?
Or planet.
Or planet. Also, there's definitely a sand joke in there that I'm not quite getting right now, but it's there. But he will absolutely, do that because he believes that this is the way all the castles on the beach should look.
Yes.
So And again, if you were to look at Darth Vader, even like he would come across as kind of chaotic, right? Because he strangles officers when they're having meetings with his force choke, or he'll go onto the battlefield and he'll just hack anybody apart. And if, God forbid, you give the wrong order as a high-ranking admiral in the Imperial Navy, because he will choke you from 3 ships away. Like he won't even raise a hand. You'll just suddenly not able to breathe. Like those are some chaotic actions. Those are not the actions of a lawful, well thought out person, but it doesn't matter because what he is striving for is law, for order.
I would say you could do a really good Vader cosplay as an evil aligned Oath of the Crown.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like, yeah, Vader would make a fantastic Oath of the Crown or Oath of Conquest paladin. Really, really good, because again, all the elements are there in terms of magic.
That one you'd necessarily link with it, but I think do you know Kuvira from the 2nd season of Korra, the like fascist earthbender leader?
That's season 4.
Season 4. Sorry, yeah, she shows up in like season 2 though. But in like
she shows up at the end of season 3. There's a whole like she saves Korra's dad. I remember talking about this with you know Neil Mack.
Yeah.
I remember talking about this with him before, because we just both watched the episode, and we were like, oh yeah, and that one girl saved Korra's dad, and like, what was it, Kuvira? And we were both like, why did they zoom in on her? What does it mean? And of course, then she's the antagonist next season.
But like, you could totally like, essentially what she's doing is like a like I guess fascism is the kind of like evil bent. Evil. It's like the evil bent towards the Oath of the Crown. Because like it's very much you're imposing your vision of what a society is and the laws that should uphold and that kind of stuff. Oh, did I just make an argument for Paladins being Nazis? That's horrible.
Only lawful evil Paladins, which is fine.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's fair. That's that's fair.
It's not fine, but
it's logical.
I feel like your comparison was fair.
That's a fair comparison. Yeah, that's the best way to put that. Jesus Christ. And we've kind of touched on it already, but Conor, what's your opinion on gun paladins and monk paladins? Because they have some interesting interactions with the smite feature.
Gun paladins and monk paladins.
Yes.
Monk paladins, pretty cool. I think I can't remember rules is written. I think they can smite on an unarmed strike. No.
No, because we chatted about this because we had a monk paladin NPC in our first.
Did we not see that? Well, that was previously, but did we not see Crawford made a post about it?
And then someone went, does this mean that like monks you could smite on a monk's unarmed strike? And he went, no, the unarmed strike is a melee weapon attack, but it's not a melee weapon attack. Is basically what he said.
It's a melee attack. It's a melee weapon attack, but it's not a melee attack with a weapon. Is that what it was?
I think.
That's it. You need to have a weapon as like an intermediary between you and your target in order to smite. That's it. Yeah.
Which is why you go Kensei monk. You make knuckle dusters your Kensei weapon, and then you smite this shit out of people like John Constantine.
I mean, monks are proficient in all simple weapons, and I would argue that knuckle dusters are about as simple as weapons come. They just make your existing fists harder.
Yes. Yeah.
I like the concept. It's a very difficult concept to pull off because probably the best way you could do it is by taking the martial initiate one where you get to pick an extra fighting style.
Yeah.
You do that and you pick the fighting style of unarmed, so you get D8s on your punches. And then I would do that as a paladin and just have 2 punches and forget about monk, because they're like polar opposites when it comes to the ability scores. You need dex and wisdom for a monk, and you need charisma and strength for a paladin. Yeah. And like it's if you roll like 4 18s, super easy to do, but unless you're rolling 4 18s, which you're probably not, it's a difficult concept to meld.
I think even if you go a dex paladin, if you're multi-classing, you have to have at least 13 strength to multi-class.
You do, because it's a prerequisite of
heavy
even
armor.
If you're multi-classing out of paladin, you still need to have the 13 before you're allowed to multi-class out of it.
Yeah, it's
so it's a very difficult one to meld. But I like the idea. It reminds me of Iron Fist, so can't go wrong.
That was literally the concept I had for that NPC, and he was even called Iron Fist.
He was, yeah. And then the gun one, look, I mean, a lot of people have very different opinions on how guns fit into D&D. I personally like them, but my D&D setting is basically kind of set in the 1800s. You know, there are breech load weapons that are like single shot, and breech loaders and stuff like that. No one has machine guns or automatic stuff. Revolvers are kind of there.
Yeah.
that's the kind of level it's at. Also, like it's a kind of technology where I think about this way too often. By the way, I go down this rabbit hole on a regular basis just by myself, and it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm at a point now in my world technologically where I feel like gunpowder and guns and stuff would come around. Fair enough, which means that like non-magical people can now have a very effective way of shooting and stuff like that. But also, how long does it take just to learn one cantrip? Firebolt, you know, and have infinite ammo on Firebolt. You know, I think about it a lot. Is it easier to train someone effectively with a firearm and then outfit them with enough ammo and stuff and have ammo manufactured and manufacture the weapon itself? Or is it easier to just train a bunch of people to know a single cantrip that they can always pull out at a moment's notice and cast firebolt, which does fire damage, and it's, you know, I think about stuff like that regularly. I also think about like there's like different effectiveness things with different types of firearms. Bows were very, very good at basically decimating charging infantry historically, because you shoot them up and they arc down, and as they arc down they just pepper a whole area, and you kind of decimate numbers that way. Bows volleys from arrows are not nearly as effective on cavalry charges, because if for a cavalry charge you don't need to be, if you're going to aim up and over at an arcing shot like a volley of arrows, you're going to aim for the densest mass to have the most effective kill count. But that doesn't matter when there's a line of horses coming at you. You need to decimate that front row in order to break the charge. And that's what muskets are really good for. Mm-hmm. Because they don't fire up and over. They fire straight down the line, meaning that you're firing a bunch of lead balls in a big peppering of an area. And the first people you are hitting is the first 2 rows of that charge, meaning that if you down enough of them, the people behind are now having to trip over other horses that are collapsing and stuff, or they have to move around them. It slows the momentum. It breaks the line. It makes cavalry it's the perfect counter to cavalry charges. So there is reasons to have both bows and firearms in your world, because they both have equal but separate places in military strategy. Mm-hmm. Sorry, a bit of a tangent. Yeah, I have a whole thing about firearms. We should read this through the firearms episode, and I can get this all out of myself.
Next episode.
Maybe I'll think. Let me see what I can do. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Last thing about these gun wielding paladins, we tried it not long ago in a one shot. Dan made a character who was a paladin. He wanted to use guns. I was trying to find a way to make the rule work that was fair, that made using smite with guns fair. And I kind of came down to it. I think I made it so that they use D6s instead of D8s. And I think I made it so usually it's like it's 1 plus the spell level is how many D8s you do. And I think I actually made it just the spell level. So if you burn the first level thought, you just get a single D6. It still seemed very powerful. And I don't know how
extremely powerful.
And I don't know how else to nerf that without just completely decimating the smite ability.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see it, because I think you could really, in my setting or in a similar Western steampunky setting, you could do like an Oath of the Lawman and do like a sheriff kind of style. It's very Crown-esque, but you might find a more niche place for it. Yeah. And you could do an Oath of the Lawman, and you could be like a gunslinging paladin. Because it's like we said before, it's the one thing paladins aren't really good at is range stuff. Maybe we could give them a range subclass, but you'd have to be willing to tweak smite. Smite's really the only thing stopping them. They'd be fine other than that, but you just need smite that isn't overly powerful. And smite's really, really good, but it's fair because you need to get right up in someone's face to smack them with a sword before you can use it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're staying way, way back with a rifle or a pistol or even a bow and arrow, like it's a lot of damage to be able to do so effectively at range.
Yeah, I think guns just come up kind of only compounded as well, because like if you're doing a longbow, it's still only a D8, and like a longsword is a D8. So it's at least, you know, with the longbow, longsword, they're at least like comparative levels of damage. But most systems that I've seen anyway, either from Gunsling or other stuff, when guns get brought in, they're usually like D10s to D12s, and it might be multiple damage die as well. Like Bad News, the sniper rifle, in
it's
the
2D12.
It's 2D12 plus Dex mod. So that's like, if you've 20 decks, that's 29 points of damage already potentially without adding anything on. And then if you're a paladin, you could drop a 4th level smite onto that. That gets you 5d8 radiant damage, so that's a potential 69 points of damage.
Hey.
Nice. But yeah, that's like
I think there's
all from 600 feet away.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's definitely a place where we could make it work. I just think it'll take some.
I think you'd literally have to drop smite to D4s.
Yeah, maybe drop smite to D4s have some other kind of tie back, like I don't know, you're not allowed to use heavy armor while you're smiting with ranged weapons or something like that. This is me completely spitballing right now, but something like that where you basically have you have some sort of drawback that makes it a bit more balanced. Anyway, we're getting on time. Martin.
Yes, Connor.
That's all the time we have today.
You know, it's been an episode a long time coming, to be honest. We probably should have
Paladins rule.
Paladins are pretty sick. I'm not going to lie. I also had a great idea for Oath of the Watchers, Paladin multi-class with some level of Sorcerer. I'm not entirely sure yet. Maybe just, some level of Sorcerer. And just do a full-on Doctor Strange Paladin build.
Well, that'd be cool, yeah.
It'd be very, very cool. And then you could serve the Vishanti as your gods.
That's pretty cool.
It would be very fun. It would be... Oh, God, I'm tempted now. But yes.
If you have any... Oh, pardon me.
No, please, go ahead.
If you have any questions you'd like to ask, stories you'd like us to share, or topics you'd like us to cover, please tweet us at MicFlayersPod on Twitter. You'll find it on the lower screen. You can find our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor Breaker, and Radio Republic. Martin, where can people find you on the internet?
People can find me on the internet, on Twitter at So Sorry It's Over, and also on the Micflayers podcast at MicFlayersPod. That'll be down the lower screen, as Conor mentioned. Conor, what about you? Where can these fine folk find you on the internet?
People can find me on the internet at 0.Conor, ZeroPointConor, 1N, very important. That's on Twitter. And also you can find me every Friday here on the Micflayers podcast at 6 p.m. Irish time.
Yay. And with that, we will say goodbye, folks, and we will see you this time next week for the newest episode of the Micflayers podcast. Bye-bye.
Later.